So we're graphing this just as practice, getting you in the right mindset. And so our first point when we go to plot this, it's going to be right 6, because remember minus 6 is going right 6, and then the minus 9 tells us to go down 9. So we go right 6, down 9, plot the point. Now I need to know what shape of graph to be making here. What shape is this graph? It's the U shape. Yes, I know that because of the squared here. Anytime you see squared, that tells you that it's going to be that U-shaped graph. So, in order to make that graph, I go over 1, up 1 on both sides. Then I go over 2 and up 4 on both sides. Then I go over 3 and up 9 on both sides. And that's the pattern that we have followed for quite a while and that we should be pretty darn good at. However, one thing that we haven't done as much of is the other points that we actually can fit on this. I just went over 3 and up 9. If I go over 4, how far up should I go? 4 squared is 16. So, yep, you're going to go over 4 now, and then you're going to go up 16. So, count over 4, count up 16. And that should drop you off up here at a positive 7 for that coordinate. And then once you have those points, go ahead and draw your U-shaped graph in through them, and you're done. This is the sort of thing that we're getting into today, a new wrinkle. So please add this equation above your next graphing grid. Write it down so that you're going to have it to go with. We're going to do a couple of these new type together. And then you're going to do a few more on your own, and then we'll check it out here. You'll notice that what's different about this graph compared to the previous graphs we've made is that this graph has that negative out in front. We haven't yet had to deal with any graphs that have that negative there. First up, I'm going to tell you that the negative doesn't change much at all. In fact, our first point, we get to our first point the same way we always have. The plus 3, that's going to mean left 3. The plus 5, that's going to mean up 5. So let's go ahead and do that. So I go left 3, up 5, plot your first point there. And then it's absolute value. What shape is absolute value? The V shape. Now, before, that meant that we had a V like this. But what the negative does is it flips it upside down. So instead of going over 1, up 1, you're going to go over 1, down 1 on both sides of that starting point. And then this is where all of our points are. Remember to draw in enough points so that you can be accurate out to the very edge of the graphing grid. Then draw in your graph with the straight edge and you're done with this one. Please write down this equation now above that next graphing grid. You'll notice I'm flipping back and forth between y equals and f of x equals. Remember that they mean the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's y equals or f of x equals. It all means the same there. All right, so let's go ahead and start making our graph on this one. In this case, the minus 1 shifts it to the right 1, just like it always has. The minus 3 shifts it down 3, just like it always has. The negative isn't changing these at all. So go right 1, down 3, plot your first point. Now having done that, we have to remember what the graph of square root looks like. Normally, a positive square root would be looking like this, kind of like the U-shaped graph, but on its side. Now we have to deal with the negative, though. The negative, remember, flips it upside down. It does not flip it over, it flips it upside down, just like our V opened down instead of up. And so if we're flipping it upside down, that means that we're still going to the right. It's just we're going down now instead of going up. So after my starting point right there, I go right 1 and down 1. And then I go right 4 and down 2 and right 9, down 3. That's where your point should be for a square root graph. Check that you have each of those plotted, then draw your graph through them. Now, this graph, again, it's going to be approached the same way that we normally would approach one of these. The plus 4, it's hanging on the end, notice? It's not in parentheses or anything like that. If it's hanging on the end, that means it's going up 4. So there's your first point. Now, normally, from there, we'd be going over 1 and up 1. However, the negative changes that. We're still going to go over 1, but instead of going up 1, we're going to go down 1.
What?
And so notice the basic effect here is that our line, and yes, it's a line because there's no squared, square root, absolute value, or anything else funky going on in it. Our line here is going down instead of going up. Basically is the effect that you can see taking place there. And again, plot each of those points, draw in your line with a straight edge, because it is a line, so we can use the straight edge to be accurate here. And then once you've done that, we'll be ready to tackle the next graph. So on this one, we again start by figuring out where we put our first point. The plus 1 goes left 1. The minus 6, that's going to go down 6. All right, and so we go left 1, down 6 to plot our first point. So we're starting right here. Now that we have our starting point, what's the shape of our graph going to be?
Wait, why did we start?
And so then, since it's squared, it's a U shape. The only difference is that instead of our U opening upward, our U is going to be opening downward. And so from that starting point there, I'm going to go over 1, down 1 on both sides. And then I'm going to go over 2 and down 4 on both sides as well. And that's the limit of our graph. We can't go any further down past that, so that's where I'm going to go ahead and now draw in my curve that goes through those points. And I'm done with that graph. All right, time for our last graph. Go ahead and do this last graph. Write down the equation, of course, as always, above the graphing grid. Make the graph, and if you got this one solid, then you're going to be ready to do our homework assignment. All right, and so for doing this last one here, the plus 6, that tells us to go left 6. The plus 4 tells us to go up 4. So go left 6, up 4, plot your point. Now, this is the one that sometimes gets us in trouble. We sometimes have trouble with the square root one because it's normally looking like that, up and to the right, and we know we need to flip it, but sometimes we just really want to flip it over. In this class this year, I'll tell you right now, you're not going to do any flips over. It's always going to be flips upside down. And so it's going to be still going to the right. It's just going to go down instead. So instead of over 1, up 1, over 1, down 1. And then over 4, down 2. Over 9, down 3, and actually we can fit one more point on here. Just like with that quadratic we did earlier, we could go over 4 up 16. With this square root, we can go over 16 and down 4. Because the square root of 16 is 4, so that's what allows us to actually fit that on there. And then draw the curve through those points, and you are done and ready to go.